Alright my friends, so now we're gonna learn the commands of the DML, data manipulation language. It is very simple. It is all about how to change the data inside your tables. So you want to insert new rows or update, delete rows. So let's go. Alright, so now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and modify and manipulate your data inside the database. So now sometimes what happens, you have a table inside your database and the table is empty. You don't have any rows, any data inside the table. Now in order to add your data to the table, what you can do, you can use the command insert. So insert gonna go and add a new rows to your table. And of course, not always the table must be empty to add your data. You can add new rows to already existing data. And SQL gonna go and append it at the end of the table. Now my friends, in order to insert new data to the target table, there are two methods. The first and the classical way, in order to insert new data, we can use the insert command and manually specifying the values that should be inserted to the table. So you're gonna start specifying in the script the values and then they're gonna be inserted as a new rows to the target table. So in this process, you are manually inserting new values to the table using like an SQL script. So now we're gonna focus on this scenario on how to insert data. Alright, now let's check quickly the syntax of the insert command. It starts with the keyword insert into, and after that we have to specify the table name, so where we want to insert, and then we make a list of all columns that we want to insert, and then we specify a list of columns where we're gonna insert values into them, and after that we say values, and finally we're gonna go now and specify the data that should be inserted to the table, and we make it as well as a list like we have done for the columns. Now in the insert statements, specifying those columns, it is totally optional. So if you don't specify the columns of the table, then SQL gonna expect you to insert values into each column. Because sometimes, of course, we don't want to insert value for each column. You can skip few columns, of course. But if you want to insert a value for each column, either you go and specify them as a list, or you can skip it. Now for the insert statements, there is a very important rule. The number of columns and values must match. So if you specify here 3 columns, then you must insert as well exactly 3 values. So this must be matching. And one last thing about the syntax, you can insert multiple values in one go. So for each row, you can specify a list of values that must be inserted. So that's all about the syntax. Let's go back to SQL in order to practice insert command. Okay, so now let's go and insert a new customers. So it's very simple. It starts with insert into. So we are saying we want to insert data into. So we have to go and specify the table name, customers. Now after that, we have to specify a list of columns where we want to insert data into it. And what we can do, we can go and check which columns do we have inside our table. So we can see we have ID, first name, country, score, and we can go and make a list of that. So we can say ID, first name, country, and score. So we just have a list of all columns inside our table customers. Now what we need the values. So which data should be inserted. So we can go and open 2 parentheses, and now we have to specify an ID. We know the last customer was 5, so we're gonna go with the customer 6. Now we have to give the name of the customer. Let's go for Anna, and then a country. Let's go for USA, and this customer has no scores. So what we can do, we can say null. So we don't know the score of this customer. Nulls means nothing. We don't know. So with that, you can go and insert 1 row. But now let's say that I would like to go and insert like a second row, 1 more customer. What we can do, we can separate this with a comma, and then we can go and repeat the whole thing again. So the ID is 7, the next one, let's call this customer Sam, and we don't know the country of this customer. So we're gonna say it's null, but the score, we know it already, it is 100. So as you can see, we are adding a value for each of those columns. And if you don't know the answer, then make it null if the database allows it to be null. Some columns, they are not allowed to be null, like the primary key. So if you go and say over here null, the database will not allow it. Well, actually, we can go and test it. Let's execute, and you can see you cannot insert the value null into the column ID. So this is not allowed. You're gonna have a 7, but for the other columns, it is allowed. You can go and check the definition of the table. Now we go and execute. Now the output of the modifications command, it's gonna always indicate what happens to the data. So it says 2 rows affected. Affected might be inserted, updated, deleted. So you're gonna get a general statement from the database, but you are getting how many record is affected. So we got 2 because we have inserted 2 records. So now as you can see, it's not like the query. We are not getting any data in the output. We are just getting a message. So this is a big difference between querying the data using the select and modifying modifying the data using inserts. We are doing now direct modifications to the data inside our database. Of course, if you want to see the data in the customers, what we can do, we can go and query the data, right? So let's go and do that. Select star from customers. I would like to see the whole table. So mark it and execute it. Now you can see we have 7 customers. So we just manipulated our data. We have here Anna and Sam. This is how you can insert data to the database. Now there is like few rules you have to be careful as you are inserting new data to your tables. You have to pay attention that the order of the columns that you have defined insert is matching the values that you are inserting over here. Let's have an example. I'm going to go and remove this over here. And let's say that we are inserting a new one, number 8. And now in the first name, instead of the name of the customers, we have inserted the country, like USA. And in the country, we have inserted the name. This is just a mistake and we are all human, right? So let's have a name like this, Max. Now, if you go and execute it, the database can accept it because it is really hard for the database to understand that you have made here an error. Both of them are varchars and the database doesn't care about the content of the data as long as you are following the rules of the data type. So now if you go and select the data from the customers, you can see now we have a customer called USA from the country Max. So the SQL gonna do it blindly, like you insert the data as long as you are following the data type rules and the constraints. So for example, if you made this error over here and you say the ID is Max and let's say the first name is, let's say 9, and you execute it, here the database is smart enough to say, you know what, there is something wrong. The ID should not be a string, so the database can reject your inserts. Be careful of the order of your columns. Now let's go and query again our table. Now if you are in the insert commands defining all the columns exactly like the table, so as you can see we have here complete match, ID, first name, country, score, we have all the columns and as well the correct order. There is like lazy way, you can go and remove the whole thing over here, and with that the database can understand, okay, we are inserting values to all of the columns. So SQL can understand you are inserting something to each columns in the correct direction. So let's go and do that correctly. 9, and here let's say we have Andreas, and we are saying from Germany. So if you go and execute it, it will be working even though we didn't define the columns, and that's because the values that we are inserting has exactly the same number of columns of the table and following as well the rules. Now moving on to the next one, you can go and add only 2 columns in the definition. If you know already always the country and the score is null, we know only 2 informations, the ID and the name, then you don't have always to go and say null, null, null and so on. We can go and skip that. Okay, so now let me show you what I mean. We're going to go after the table name and we're going to define only 2 columns, the ID and the first name. So that means we are telling SQL we want to insert only 2 columns. And now you have to be careful. If you define here 2 columns, then the values should be as well 2 columns. So we're going to remove the country and the score and we can go and add only 2 informations. So 10, and we can go and add here, for example, Sarah. So if you go and execute it, it will be working. And now what SQL is doing with the other 2 columns, it's going to be nulls. So let's go and select again from our table. You can see here Sarah has null in the country and as well in the score because we didn't define those informations. But be careful, you cannot here skip a column that is not allowed to be null. So you have always to have in your list all the columns that are not null. So for example, I cannot go and insert only the first name. I will get an error because the database can try to insert a null in the ID and this is not allowed. So you can skip only nullable columns. Alright my friends, so that was the first method on how to insert data to your target table, as you saw by typing manually the values inside an insert command using values. And now let's move to another method. We're gonna insert data, but this time not manually. We're gonna insert data using another table. So imagine we have the following scenario. We have an already existing table with data, and this is gonna be the source table, the source of your data. And we have another table. This table is empty, and we want to insert a new data to this target table. Now what you can do, we can take the data from the source table and insert it into the target table without manually writing a script for the values. So we are moving the data from one table to another. Now in order to do that, we need to do 2 steps. The first step, we have to write an SQL query using select, from and so on in order to select the data that we need from the source table. And once you do that, you will get a result. So this is like you are doing a normal query. query. You write select and you will get an answer with the results. And now what we can do in the next step, we can take these results and use an insert command in order to insert these results into the target table. And with that, we have moved the data from the source table to the target table. So first write the query on the source table, and the second step, use an insert to move this results to the target table. So let's go back to SQL in order to do that. So now we have the following task, and it says insert data from the table customers into the table persons. So that means the source table is the customers and the target table is persons. Now how I usually do it is that I keep my eye on the target table to understand the structure of this table, and I start writing the query from the source table. If you go to the left side, we can see, okay, we have here an ID, we have here person name, birth date, and phone. And you can see only the birth date accept nulls, and the rest we have always to provide informations. So with that, I have now understanding about the table persons. Now next, I'm gonna go and start writing the query from the source. So we start like this. Select star from our table customers, just to have an overview of our table. Now the next step, we're gonna go and design a perfect result from this query that is matching the target table. So in the output, we need ID, and we have it from the customer from the original table. We're gonna go and select ID. Okay, so now next, we need a person name, and here we have from the original table something called first name. So this is a perfect match. So we're gonna go and select this table as a second column. So we have covered the first two. Then the third one is gonna be the birth date. Well, my friends, we don't have birth dates, but the database can accept it as a null. So I'm gonna go and write a null because I don't have such information from the source table. And now the next one gonna be the phone as well. We don't have phone informations, but we cannot have it as a null because it says here not null. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and add a static value, a default value. So we're gonna have two single quotes, and in between we're gonna say unknown. Since it is varchar, it can accept this word. So now let's go and just query. So we have the ID, we have the first name, the birth date is empty, and the phones is unknown. Now you might say, but the column name is not matching with the column name of the persons. Well, the database does not care about that. As long as the result of the data is matching the table, it's gonna go and insert it. So the database will never compare the column names together. But if you like and go and add here like the aliases exactly like the target table, it will not hurt, but it has no effect on the results. Alright, okay, so now we have like query select and we have a result, but this is not an insert. So how are we gonna insert the result of this into the table persons? Well, for that we need the insert into command. So insert into, and now we have to specify the target table. It can be the persons. And of course you can go and list all the column names, but if you have like exact match, you can skip it. But for me, I would like always to add it just to make sure that we don't have any issue. So the ID, person name, birth dates, and the phone. So that's it. Let's go and execute. So it is working. Now we can see 10 rows affected. Well, that means 10 rows are inserted from the table customers into the target persons. And now what we can do, we can go and query the table persons just to check that everything is working perfectly. Select star from persons and let's go and execute. And with that, you can see our 10 persons that we have added from the customers. So with that, we have moved the data from one table and inserted into another table. And as you can see, it was very simple. First, you have to write a query from the source table in order to collect the data that you need. And then you go and insert it into the target table. So this is really nice and easy. And this is another way on how to insert data into your database. Okay, so with that we have learned how to insert data to our tables. Now let's say that I don't have something new. I don't have any rows to be added to my table, but I have an update. I would like to go and change the content of the already existing rows. So what you can do, we can use the command updates in order to change the content of already existing rows. So again, my friends, insert gonna go and insert completely new rows, but update gonna go and change the data of already existing rows. row. Now let's have a look quickly to the syntax of the updates. It starts with the keyword updates, and then we have to specify the table name. And after that, we're going to use sit in order to specify what are the new values for the columns. So you have to write down for each column that you want to update a new value. And you separate the columns, of course, using a comma. Now, after that, we have to specify as well a where condition. So it's like the queries, you say where, and then you write a condition. And if you don't do that and you don't use the where clause, what's going to happen? You will end up updating all the rows inside your table. So that's why we need always the where clause. Alright, so that's all about the syntax. Let's go back to SQL in order to update our data. Okay, so let's have the following task, and it says change the score of customer 6 to 0. So that means we have to go and modify the data of the customer ID equal to 6. So now first I would like to go and have a look to our data. So select star from customers. And now the task is targeting this customer over here, and we would like to replace the null to a 0. Now how we can go and update this information inside the table? We can use the update command. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start writing update, and after that we have to specify the table name. So what we are updating the customers. And then we're going to tell the database to set the value of the score to a 0. So we'd like to update and change the value from null to a 0. And now here comes something very risky. Don't execute this query yet. If you do that, what's going to happen? The database is going to go to the table customers and replace all those values of all customers to a 0. So it's going to go and update the whole table. And this is of course very risky. That's why in the update command, we have to give a where condition, a filter, in order to target only specific row or the rows that you want really to modify. In this case, we want to change only one row. So what we have to do is to go and specify the where condition like we have done in the select query. Nothing new, right? So we're going to say where the customer ID is equal to 6. And with that, SQL will not go and update everything. First, it's going to filter the data and then update. And now before I execute, just to make sure, I go and check which data can be affected. So it's very simple. You go and select star from table customer, and then I go and take the exact where and put it in my query, and then I select the whole thing and execute. And now if this query gives me the data that should be modified, then I'm doing the update command correctly. And in this case, we are targeting only one customer. This is the customer number 6. And with that, I feel really confident with my update. So what we can do, since I'm going to use this later, I'm going to put the whole thing in a comment. And if I execute now, only the update going to be executed. So let's go and do that. Now, very important to check the message. You can see one row is affected, which is really good because if I see here 10 rows is affected, that means everything is updated. Now, let's go and check the data. I'm going to go and remove the where here and check the whole table. Now you can see we still have the old scores. Only Anna has now scored 0 instead of null. So this is how I usually update the data. You have to do it very carefully. Now let's move to another task. It's going to say change the score of the customer number 10 to 0 and update the country to UK. So now this time we are targeting the user number 10. As you can see, she doesn't have the country and score, and the task wants us to change the score to 0 and the country to UK. So now how we can do it? We're going to use the exact same command but with different condition. So the ID this time is equal to 10 and the score is to 0, but now we have to change as well the country. Now if you want to do multiple updates, you're going to have here a comma after the score and the new line, and let's say country equal, and then we can add UK. So select the whole thing and let's go and execute. So again, it is affecting only one row. This is really good. And if you go and check the table, search for Sarah, you can see in one update we have updated 2 columns, the country and as well the score. So with that, we have solved the task. It's very simple. Now moving on to the second task, it says update all customers with a null score by setting their score to 0. So this time we are not speaking about one specific customer. We are talking about updating the data for a subset of customers. So now imagine you have like hundreds of customers and you are making one update command for each customer. It's going to be really wasting of time. Now instead of that, we can specify a condition that targets multiple customers, and we're going to do the update for those customers in one go. So now let's see how we're going to do it. We are talking only about replacing the nulls with a 0. So we don't need the country. So set score equal to 0. But now we will not be specific for the IDs. Now we have to make a new condition. It's going to say like this, where score is null. Now, of course, in the course, we have a full dedicated chapter about the nulls. And here, all what we are doing is we are searching for scores that is equal to null. But we cannot write an equal. We have to write it like this, is null. Now, of course, before we update anything, we have to go and test it in a query. So select star from customers where score is null. Let's go and execute. Now, as you can see, we have 2 customers where the score is null. So that means this condition is targeting a subset of customers, and we're gonna do now the updates for multiple rows for this subset. So that means we can run this query. Let's go and execute it. Now you can see 2 rows are affected. So that means multiple rows got affected, got updated. So now if you go and query our table customers, you can see we don't have any nulls inside the scores, and we have replaced all the nulls with a 0. And of course you can do the same thing. You can go and make an update command in order to replace all the nulls in the country to maybe something unknown or any default value that you want. So this is how you can update multiple rows in one go. Alright my friends, so with that we have learned how to insert new rows to our tables, and as well how to update the content of already existing row. Now the last thing or command that we can do to the data inside the table of that, we can go and remove rows from our table, and we can do that using the command delete. So if we use delete, SQL gonna go and start removing already existing rows inside your table. Alright, now for the syntax of the delete, it's gonna be very simple. We're gonna say delete from, and then we're gonna write the table name, and here comes something very important. We have to add a where condition, and it's like the update. If you don't do that, if you don't include where condition, what's gonna happen, you will end up deleting all the rows inside the table. So the syntax is very simple. Let's go back to SQL in order to delete some data. Okay, so now we have the following task: delete all customers with an ID greater than 5. So now we have to go and delete all the customers that we recently added. So how we can do it? It's very simple. We're gonna say delete from. So that means I want to delete something from a table, and we have to specify the table name. It's going to be the customers. So the syntax is very simple. Now, my friends, this is more risky than updates, because if you execute it like this, don't do that yet, wait. What's going to happen? All the data of the customers going to be deleted. So you will get an empty table, and we will not do that. So now we're going to do exactly like the update command. We're going to specify the where clause. So it says the ID should be greater than 5. So that means ID higher than 5. So with that, we are defining a subset of the data that should be deleted, not everything. And if we check in the updates, we have here to do a double check before deleting anything. So again, what we do, we select star from table customers, and we're gonna go and copy the where condition in order to test what's gonna be deleted. So it's gonna be all the customers that is higher than 5. And with that, I'm making sure that my delete command is correct, which is from what I see here is correct. So those 5 customers should be deleted. So now let's go and delete those customers. And now very important to read the message. It says 5 rows affected. So that means 5 customers got deleted. This is better than 10, of course. So let's go and check what customers left. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the original customers, and everything else got deleted. And with that, we have solved the task. And this is how we can delete data from tables. Be very careful. Always test before doing the delete command. Okay, so now we have the following task, and it says delete all data from table persons. So that means we have to go and drop everything from the table persons. But we don't want to delete the table. We just want to delete the data inside the table. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna write delete from, and now we have to specify the table persons. And if we execute it, what's gonna happen is SQL gonna go and drop all the data in the persons. But in SQL, we have more interesting commands. If you want to delete everything from the table persons, we have that truncate. Truncate, it is exactly like delete from persons. It's gonna go and make the whole table empty. But why I like to use truncate? Because it is way faster than delete. If you have large tables, the delete command gonna be really slow, because with the delete, there is like a lot of things happening behind the scenes. There is like logs and protocols. But if you are using trunc, the database gonna skip all those extra stuff, and it's gonna be very fast. So if you want to delete all the data from table, you can do it like this if it's like small table. But what I usually do, I go and write truncate and then table. We're gonna get the same effect. And with that, I'm saying reset everything, make the table empty. So let's go and execute it. And now with that, you will not get the number of deleted rows. And that's why its truncate is way faster. It is not protocoling anything. It's not logging anything. It just go and delete all the data without any extra steps. So This is how we can delete all the data from a table, but the table still exists. Okay, my friends, so with that you have learned the basics on how to manipulate your data inside the database, the data manipulation language DML. And with that I can tell you we have covered the basics of SQL. So with that we have covered the beginner level. Now in the next chapters we will be in the intermediate level. And the first thing that you're gonna learn in the intermediate level, you will learn how to filter your data. And here you're gonna cover many operators that you can use inside the where clause. So let's go.
If you like this video and you want me to create more content like this, I'm gonna really appreciate it if you support the channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. All those stuff gonna help the channel with the YouTube algorithm, and as well my content gonna reach the others. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.